Welcome to Under the Microscope. This series is brought to you by the Real Scientists Nano team. Our goal is to provide a platform where scientists can communicate their work and interact with the public. With that in mind, every week we introduce you to a scientist working in the field of materials and nanoscience. Hello everyone, today we have with us Clara Barker, who is a lab manager at the University of Oxford at the Department of Materials. Hi Clara.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good, yeah. Clara, could you tell us how did you end up in your current research field?
Yeah, so it was completely by accident. I delayed going to university because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And after a few years, I decided that I wanted to do electronic engineering. So I got really into electronics and robotics and things like that. So I thought, right, cool, this is what I want to do. I wanted to make gadgets. I wanted to be a crazy inventor. And so I did an engineering degree, electrical engineering degree. And during that degree, I was offered the chance to do a year placement. So I went and worked with a company that made food packaging for the food industry. And so they were heavily involved in their whole thing was material engineering. It was how do we keep your food fresher for as long as possible? So they made the equipment, but they also sold some of the processes. I joined them as an electrical engineer. So I was supposed to be sat at a desk just designing circuits. But I'm not very good at sitting still for that long. And so I asked if I could go and work on the shop floor and learn how they actually got fitted in the machines and stuff like that. And once I'd done that, I didn't really want to go back up to the machine. And I started asking about the process and the material engineering side of it. And so I ended up being asked to help on a really large project for the company at the time. It was a large machine. It was a 2-story tall machine. And I ended up as one of the main people that was running this machine during the testing and the material engineering sort of testing side of it. And I followed the machine out to its location when it was installed in Japan for a company. And I just really got interested in the material side of it from there. And so word got around and I got recommended to do a PhD in material engineering by someone that I worked with. And the project just sounded really interesting. So I said, sure. I didn't even know what material engineering or material science was at the time. I had no intention. I was just going to make cool little robots. But yeah, I got into it by mistake, by accident. But I really enjoyed it once I got into it. And so my PhD was just super interesting. And so I'm still here. I'm still doing it.
Okay, that's quite a journey you've had, and you have seen different sides of materials as well, like starting from electrical to material science now with the thin films and all. Could you tell us how and where does your research, your current research, fall in the domain of the big picture of the materials or nanoscience?
Yes, so there's a couple of main areas that I'm involved in at the moment. So like I say, my main thing is making thin films for whatever area that is. And my group that pays me is actually the Center for Applied Superconductivity. So the group is set up to work on high temperature superconductors, and thin film superconductors can be used for all different things. So I'm playing around with doing serious science on different materials. But to be honest, I'm just seeing what works and I'm just trying a few things. So that's where the bulk of my research comes at the moment. I'm also doing some experiments for another group, which is working with trying to change the structure of stainless steel just to see what happens, really. Fingers crossed we'll make some super anti-corrosive stainless steel that will be really useful in industry or something. Thin films are probably less useful than bulk, but they can be really good as a top layer. So I'm just trying a few different things at the moment. The other thing that our group does, I'm not as much involved with this. I'm there in a more supporting kind of role, is we've got quite a lot of students that are working on solid state thin film batteries. So there's quite a lot of money in batteries at the moment, a lot of research money. And so, yeah, we've got, just before this interview, I met one of our new research students, one of our new graduate students. So, yeah.
Okay. So you're working on quite a range of projects, from steel to battery, was it? Batteries,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, batteries.
So you have your hands everywhere, basically.
Yeah, and I've worked with all different types of materials as well in the past. So I've worked with thin films that are good for biocompatibility, for putting inside the human body. I've worked on hardness coatings. I've worked on transparent conductive oxides. I've worked on photocatalytic layers. For me, I think I'm more interested in the actual process of making the thin films and seeing what I can do to change that, rather than what it's for. I just want to know, can I change the film? Can I change the structure? And does that change? So for me, like I say, it's more about making the films than actually what they're for or who they're for.
Okay, more on the fabrication side of it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Then it does sound like you're working on a bunch of cool projects. If you had to pick one project which you're proud of, could you pick one out and explain it to us in very, very simple words in the section we call In Other Words?
So one thing, I was given this small side project, looking at putting some thin films onto materials that I used for implants in the human body. So I didn't realize, but there's all sorts of different things that are used in the medical world. And I was given some spinal implants. So if people have issues with their spine, in order to try and help them, they use different types of plastic or metals and ceramics. The company that I was working with, they make them out of a particular type of plastic, but it's not very biocompatible. It doesn't really integrate well into the body. So they asked me if I could coat it with some materials just to help it with that compatibility. So I did. It was an interesting project. The actual coating itself was really easy, but I had to come up with because the technique that I mostly use, which is called magnetron sputtering, is very much line of sight. And so it just coats where you can see it. And the shape that they give me was really intricate with all these different crevices and cracks and holes. And so I had to try and make sure that I coated all of this material. And so I came up with this super intricate system that turned it in like 3 or 4 different directions as it was running. It wasn't so complicated to do, but it was kind of fun to play with. And it was great to see that it actually worked. And from what I can tell, like the company were really happy with the results, and they certainly went on to patent it. So the idea that there's a coating that I've done that might be inside somebody's body is kind of weird and kind of cool at the same time.
This is science fiction coming to life, I would say. This is like coming to reality. It's like intersect. This is amazing. That's cool. I can imagine why you picked this as the project that you're proud of and you want to brag about. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's just really cool.
Okay, awesome. I'm guessing here that you're super happy with your current research that is going on. However, one can always improve the conditions. So if you had 3 wishes to improve your research experience, what would you ask for? And I'm not promising anything here.
Yep, no, I know that, but we've got to try and change things.
Right.
I think the first thing that I would really like to see is just permanent contracts, long contracts. Just, I've got a year left on my current contract, and it's a case of, well, do I need to start writing new research proposals? Do I need to start getting things out in it? it becomes stressful and you stop concentrating on what you're doing and stop really being initiative because you don't have that comfort zone. I know that if some people had permanent contracts, maybe they would become complacent, but I think early career researchers especially need a little bit of stability in their lives. I think less people would walk away from academic science if they had longer contracts. And I know for me that would make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think another thing that I'd like to see is maybe, and these relate, but I'd like to see research bodies start to fund scientists rather than actual science projects. I think it'd be really nice if we've got someone who is doing a lot of diversity work and is going out there and doing lots of outreach and going into schools. They tend to do that on their own time, or they tend to have to squeeze in the science to get the funding to be able to continue to do that. If we actually started funding people, then because we know that they're good, we know that they're good for science as a whole, it'd be really nice to see those people getting funded so that they can continue to do that outreach without the worry of having to get research money. And I'd just like to see that sort of change. Don't get me wrong, we still need to fund projects, but every so often I think if we talk about having these role models, we need to fund them. We need to give them money as well because they're good for science. So that's a really huge thing. And I think the third thing in terms of changing things is just, I think we need to potentially give more equipment funding to universities. I know it sounds silly, but
it's not. It's not.
I'm constantly working with gauges that are 20 years old that don't really work, and I'm just cleaning them every week to try and get them to work, or pumps. When I worked in industry and when I work with people from industry, they're just like, we'd change that. We wouldn't have that. And, you know, we've got some equipment that's still got big, huge dials on it. And it's like, oh, it might not work today because that's how it is. So, and unfortunately, with research grants, you tend to budget for maybe one bit of equipment. And if something breaks, then it's just like, where do we get this money from? So I'd like to see, like, I think if we actually gave researchers modern equipment, they might be able to get stuff done quicker.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of time I've spent that I've lost to just fixing equipment during my PhD, I must have lost at least a year and a half on broken equipment, and everybody else I know says the same thing. So yeah, we need new equipment.
We need funding for that. Also, I must say these three wishes are quite unique, and I'm really, yeah, this is really interesting, especially the second one that you pointed out, that you should fund, or there should be a system to fund scientists and not just the science, because science is not just, or research is not just about the science, it's also about the role models and the whole package. It's not just one part of your life. Well, I wish I could grant all these three wishes with the snap of fingers. Well, let's hope for the best. Hopefully, people listening to this podcast, maybe the funding agencies listening to this podcast, will probably try and change for the better.
Yeah.
And work towards a better and more stable future for scientists as well.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. It's hard to be innovative when you're just stressed about where your next grant funding's coming from, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, could you tell us what are you most looking forward to in the next 3 months?
Yeah, so I'm about to start. I think I've got away from doing as much hands-on research recently, and over the summer, I've actually been able to do I've been making a lot of thin films, which has been really nice. I was supporting other people's research and not really doing my own. So I'm looking forward to continuing that, and hopefully changing the world of superconductors in the next 3 months, quite obviously by some major breakthrough. But realistically, there's some new material material systems that I'd like to experiment with and just see what happens. And I'd like to see if there's something I can do there that would maybe answer one or two of the smaller questions that lingering in the superconductivity world at the moment. Like I say, we're not necessarily going to make vast, huge changes in the next few months, but it'd be nice to maybe, because I've got the time to try things, because I'm being paid without being reliant on a project, I've got the opportunity to experiment and try stuff and see what happens. And so fingers crossed we'll find something really interesting there. And also, I said I've been making some stainless steels. That's been for another research group. I've actually got, I'm making materials for 2 different projects in that group. And so what I'm really excited about is they find some really, really good uses and write lots of papers and put my name on them. That'd be lovely.
That's quite a lot that is going on for you. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that your experiments will be successful and your collaborators are writing a lot of papers and putting you on them.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. That'd be amazing.
Okay, Clara, before we let you go, could you tell us what are these big challenges or questions that are faced by the nano or material science field, the bigger picture sort of a thing?
That's an interesting one. I know in terms of superconductors, which is where my main group is, just being able to find superconductors that are superconductive at higher temperatures. At the moment, they've got to be cooled down really low. And if we could just sort of increase that temperature and make it more viable for various projects, that'd be really good. I know someone's, I just saw an article recently that someone had theoretically discovered a superconductor that will superconduct at 100 degrees Celsius. But unfortunately, it's got to be at really, really, really high pressure, which is kind of not necessarily so practical. So if we can sort of eke it up, especially if we can get materials that work very stably with liquid nitrogen, that would be fantastic. Room temperature would be even better, but I think more realistic is liquid nitrogen. And then if we can really crack those materials, there's a few materials questions that could really go towards helping get us working with fusion reactors. So if we use tokamaks for fusion energy, then chances are there's superconductors in the accelerators. And also we need different materials for the magnets that we use to shape fusion, the plasma in a fusion reactor. And for me, I think if we could really get fusion reactors working so that we don't need to rely on other energy means, that would be fantastic. So I think there's some questions that we've got to crack there, but I think things are really promising. Things are really moving at the moment in the world of fusion reactions. So I'm excited to see where that goes.
Ooh, okay. Well, promising stuff coming up. We will keep our eyes out for the news or scientific article coming on these topics, both for superconductivity at high temperature, high being in quotes. By high, I mean room temperature. We should clarify that in the world of superconductivity, a high temperature means room temperature. That's already quite optimal.
In terms of superconductivity, talking about minus 200 degrees Celsius is high temperature. So I love it when I'm doing school outreach. I've got visitors in the lab, and I say to them like, "Oh yeah, we want high temperature. We just want it at minus 200 degrees Celsius." And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. So I love that.
Well, fingers crossed for the world of materials and nanoscience. And it was really fun speaking to you, Clara. Thank you very much for making the time. And we look forward to your time on Twitter.
Yeah, no, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me along. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
To know more about us, please visit our website realscientistsnano.org and follow us on Twitter at realsci_nano.